This is the Cervelo Aspero gravel bike, set up with the new SRAM Red Explore Groupset, 13 speeds, so 1046 up the back. I have a 40-tooth chainring on the front, matched with some SRAM Red E1 levers up here, which I absolutely love. They are a contender for the product of the year for sure. Also the Zip 303 Explore wheels with the super wide 32mm internal matched with some 45mm rubber on top. Now today, I'm going to attempt to make a few modifications to this bike to make it more suitable for road riding with no gravel involved. Now I've been collecting the components for this project for quite some time, and if I can get this complete today, it means I only need to take one bike with me this weekend when we travel to the high country for some road and gravel riding. It also means a lot more space in the car for other stuff. Now first up, a quick look at the wheels before we do a deep dive, and I'm going with the Magine XR DB607 Ultra 2025 edition. They are nice and deep, should spin quite nicely on the Aspero with some road tyres. Speaking of road tyres, I'll be running the ever popular GP5000s from Continental, 32mm in width. I shouldn't have any problem with clearance of these on the Aspero. I'm also upgrading the chainring to a 46 tooth on the front. This is a threaded chainring, so I will need to unthread the existing 40 tooth using this tool for the first time. This should be a bit of fun getting my hands dirty with that. New chainring means new chain. So a longer chain, 12/13 speed SRAM E1 red flat top chain. Yep, I think I got that right. In beautiful rainbow too. Already pre-waxed thanks to the Silka system that I've been using here. This is a time saver. With the strip chip, it's definitely the way to go. It takes about 45 minutes for a chain to go from in the packet to that condition right there. And it means the entire Lama garage doesn't smell like chemicals. Okay, so they're the components. There's the bike. Let's have a close look at these wheels before preparing them for install. The DB607 is a new addition to the EXAR lineup for 2025, and the 405 and the 508 have also been refreshed for 2025. All these wheels now having the Vonoa carbon spokes. Now the EXAR wheels that I reviewed last year were highly rated by Ning of Wheel Society, a professional wheel builder from Melbourne, and they've remained on my giant TCR road bike, so they've been holding up quite well. Now a quick overview of the DB607. They have a front depth of 60mm, a rear wheel depth of 67mm, so yeah, they are deep. Internal width, 23mm on a hooked rim. The external of the front measures in at 31.5mm, and the rear by design is a little narrower, coming in at 30mm. The rear hub is a 36-tooth ratchet system similar to DT Swiss, and on the scales, sans rim tape or valves, the front comes in at 677 grams and the rear at 800 grams, giving us a total of 1477 with a claimed weight of 1460 plus or minus 3%. So on the scales, these do come in within spec. Pricing over on the Magine website lists these wheels, all three, at $11.99. Retail here in Australia, they come in at $19.99 for all three sizes. On my recent visit to the Magine headquarters in Qingdao, I dropped past the XR production line to see these wheels being built up. And yes, they are hand-built. Now, if you'd like a deep dive into the XR wheels by another professional wheel builder, Jim Langley has a brilliant 33-minute evaluation of the XR Ultra Dark wheel set over on his YouTube channel. Now, I'll link below to this video. While this assessment isn't of the 2025 model 607 wheels, they're off the same production line, and aside from the spokes and rim depth, they're effectively the same wheel. Either way, Jim provides an excellent level of detail, which I would consider unmatched here on YouTube for wheel set evaluations. Okay, onto the task of getting this all together and on the bike, starting off with the rim tape, which does not come pre-installed from Magine. They do supply the rim tape, just not the installation of it. A couple of tips with the rim tape is make sure everything is squeaky clean, make sure the rim tape is relatively warm, and pull as tight as possible, leaving a few inches overlap at the rim, and job done. Now, before installing the GP5000 S TR 32mm tyres, a quick weight check, coming in at 319 grams each. And the last task before putting tyres on the rims is to install the tubeless valves into the rims. I do this by installing the valves in reverse first and poking them up through the tubeless tape, so you know exactly where to put a hole in the rim tape with a knife. And once that's done, it's just a simple task of poking the valve straight through and putting the lock nut on the outside. I have been told over and over again that GP5000s are almost impossible to mount on rims, but that hasn't been the case for me to date with the tyres I've mounted on the rims I've mounted using this method here. So that's starting at the opposite side of the valve. You might need a tyre lever just to pop that first bead over and into that channel. From there, rinse and repeat. Obviously, once your logos are lined up with the valve. Starting off from the top, take your time to work all the way down and around. Obviously not at a hard surface. I'm on a trainer mat there. And that just pops on by hand. Easy as that. Next tip, use a little bit of water around the outside of the rim, not too much, to ensure the tyre beads into place easily. And once the valve is correctly on either side of the bead, which I do there, boom, that's on. And no real loud cracks either. Once you've used a little bit of water to enable that tyre to slip into place. Too easy. Now, tubeless setups used to frustrate me. I've done a video on how frustrating it can be, but with the right tools and the right technique, I am converted, even on road. Yeah, well, 32mm roads, they're not exactly holding 110 to 120 PSI. And within a few minutes, that's beaded on nice and straight. Again, another tip, make sure your wheels are correctly beaded. Shake that sealant about, make sure it distributes itself evenly throughout the wheel. And then finally, the rotor with the lock ring tool there, and it is job done for the front wheel. And for the rear wheel, it was rinse and repeat of the same process and the same results. Everything installed and set up in a few minutes. When it comes to removing SRAM chain sets, which needs to be done to swap this chainring over, there's a few methods that I've seen out there. This one I call the grab the front brake, balance carefully, and stomp. Perfect. Job done. It's loose enough to put up on the stand now. One feature I do love of the new SRAM Explore 13-speed full mount rear derailleur is the cage lockout, which is similar to their Eagle rear derailleurs. Allows you easy access to take the chain off and take the wheel out and install the rear wheel. Okay, both wheels out. And let's put the front DB607 in. Not much else is required for that. And I will loop back to this installation in just a few minutes. There's a little trick that I did here to solve a problem on the front end. The SRAM Explore 13-speed cassette being all one piece makes removal and switching between wheels really, really easy, as long as you have the right tools. And the installation tip is to press it flat with your hand and slowly install it so you're not cross-threading anything. And after about 5 turns, you are on and good to go. Now to get the chainring swapped over from a 40 tooth to a 46 tooth, which would be more suitable for road riding, it's onto using the threaded chainring removal tool from SRAM. And the correct process there is to remove that little locking pin, install the anchoring bolt into the pedal thread, and I'll flip this over here, install the chain tool here. Now you could possibly do this, and as people have mentioned, maybe with a chain whip and a vise of some sort. But yeah, you can see here how delicate this operation is, and it ensures the teeth on the chainring are not compromised or bent in any way, and the chainrings aren't going into your wrists. So we can see the tool do its job right about here. Bang. Lets off a crack of a noise. That loosens the chainring. We'll get the tool out of there. It's about a quarter turn or an eighth turn to get the chainring off. I've done a whole video on this tool specifically. If you want to check that out, I'll put links below. Okay, chainring off, and as comparison, the 46 versus the 40, there's a few teeth difference there. Well, 6 to be specific. The tool also comes with a new securing pin if you don't happen to reuse the old one, which can be reused. And the full tightening of it will happen when you first pedal the bike. There's not a lot of movement in that at all. So once that new securing bolt is in place, I'll make sure everything looks nice and tidy. And reinstallation, 8mm hex wrench, snug down to spec. Right, that's going absolutely nowhere. And Pro MX right hand side on, job done. Sizing a chain for the full mount rear derailleur setup is quite an interesting task. First, measuring out the chainstay length if it's not already known. measuring here at 425mm. Also cross-referencing this with the Cervelo website on the Aspero that I have. It is, yes, 425mm, that's correct. With that information, you load up the SRAM Access app. Under Tools, they have a chain sizing guide. So the full mount chain length guide, they call it. And once loaded, we input the bike type, which is drop bar, drivetrain type, which is Explore full mount, chainstay length 425 on the app there, and the chainring size I'll be installing is 46. Clicking on calculate, it says right there, chain length 120 links with a setup cog and what chainrings that's compatible with. Now, where exactly do you cut a chain for 120 links? Well, if you have a 126 link chain, that's right there. If you have a 114 link chain, then you're out of luck. You'll need to go get yourself a 126 length chain to get at least 120 links. Super easy to get sorted and a great little tool from SRAM within their app. So with the spot marked out and the chain cut to size, you just simply put the chain on and it's good to go. Oh, that's also jumping over the hour or so it took to get this chain fully prepared with the Silk Wax system. It was a relief after installing the rear wheel to see the disc rotor lined up perfectly with the caliper. And on with the chain, which I will admit, as long as nobody lets SRAM know, that I reuse their quick links. And I've done so for years, having no problems whatsoever. Quick tip, locking that quick link in with a few taps. All right, job done. And that's all the work complete. Okay, there we are. That all went to plan, surprisingly well. Well, it did take a few weeks to get all the correct parts together, and with the power of video editing, you won't see the part where I smashed my wrist into the chainring. So yeah, as I said, all went to plan without a problem. Ow. Okay, with a few hours left of daylight and 30 degrees Celsius outside, as we come into summer here in Australia, I'm going to kit up and get out for a ride on this bike just to bed everything in, especially the chain. Immersive wax takes a few kilometers to just break things in and make sure the chain bends properly. And I'm very interested to see how fast this goes with the 46 on the front. All right, I'm out for a ride. Okay, so we're a few good weeks down the road since I did this conversion on the Aspero, and in that time I've spent a lot of time riding the bike in this configuration, including doing most of the festive 500 outdoors on it. Now I've spent more time riding the bike and not too much time capturing any beautiful cinematic shots of the equipment in use, so apologies there for not having any eye candy. I'll admit being focused more on the function of the bike in this conversion than the fashion and what it looks like, but I do have some footage to show. Now over the last few weeks I've been tweaking and modifying the setup of this bike, and I've learned a few things along the way that I want to share. Maybe they'll be helpful to you, maybe they'll just serve as a reminder for me for future reference. Okay, onto my takeouts from my experience with this conversion. Number one, do not use yellow sealant. Look, any sealant that I've used that has been yellow simply hasn't solved any problems when I get a puncture. On a recent trip with the bike, I had to dump another 40mm of Dock Blue into the rear tyre to keep it inflated, and apparently I'm not alone on this one. So yellow sealant is out for the Lama bikes. Number two, use a head unit that records gear usage. It's very handy for post-ride analysis to understand what gear range will work best for the terrain that you're riding on. Now for this, of course, you'll need an electronic group set, and using the SRAM Access web analysis tool, I get a good visual representation of what gears I was using on the ride, over time or in power zones. Over time is most useful. Look, here's a relatively flat ride with a good spread of gears used. Those were the Tip Road and the Wandillagong time trial courses up in Bright that I'm very, very familiar with, but not too many long steep climbs on those. So again, good spread of gears used with the 46 on the front and the 1046 on the back. Now here's a ride out to Toowoomba Gap with the climb included, and it's a tale of two terrains there, the flat and undulating on the way out and the climb itself. We're at about 5 to 6% gradient. I'd be in the 38 on the back, and any steeper I was in the 1-to-1 ratio of 46-46. And you can see that represented there in the bar chart from SRAM Access Web. Now, to pull up a ride where I was obviously way off on the gear selection, here's when the bike was configured as a gravel bike, and 42 up the front and 46 on the back was the biggest gear, and that was nowhere near suitable. See how much time I was spending there in the big gear on the back? What I was riding there was not suitable for that terrain. It was way too steep. Now I do have a solution for that. It's a whole other video. I have an Eagle Transmission T-type rear derailleur, or full mount rear derailleur to install, giving this bike its third identity. Yes, for steep stuff. On to takeout number 3, and that is having confidence and trust in the equipment that you're using. Those being the frame, handlebars, group set that's not going to skip gears or throw a chain in a sprint, trusting the wheels and the tyres. Now this confidence for me is something that I get when working on the bike myself. I've put the rim tape on, I've beaded the tyres, I know there's enough sealant in the tyres that's not yellow, I know I'm running the correct tyre pressures, and I know that every bolt is torqued down to spec. Now while it's not feasible for everyone to become their own mechanic, if it's something you've wanted to get more hands-on with, I'd highly encourage it. Watch videos, read manuals, book in for a mechanics course. What you'll learn will definitely come in handy at some point. Case in point last year, when I had to fix Richie Port's chain with a drink bottle and then a rock on the side of a road up in Sydney. Richie then went on to take a long-standing local KOM with that fixed chain up in Sydney. Now I couldn't talk about it at the time, those bikes were under embargo, but there's an example of being hands-on with the bike coming in very, very useful at the time. Okay, takeout number 4, multiple disc brake wheel sets. Now it's rare that 2 wheel sets will be one-to-one identical when it comes to rotors. Shimming or spacing rotors is sometimes required if you're swapping between wheels. Now it's possible to shim rotors so they get very, very close, and close enough that you don't need to adjust the brake calipers on the frame. That can be a bit of a pain. One thing I found very interesting is that I had to shim the XR 607 front wheel when I was using one type of SRAM rotor, but I didn't need to shim it when I switched over to the SRAM CLX rotor. I thought it was the XR wheel that was just a little bit different. The gravel wheel that I was using wasn't the case. The XR wheel was fine, the rotor was the cause of that. Takeout number 5 is a quick one, and that is the change in geometry or bike fit. My gravel bikes are set up a little shorter than my road bikes for overall reach, and I felt a little cramped on the setup of the Aspero when it was in road configuration. Now I found a middle ground by installing a longer stem, so I'm now running a 120mm stem on the front of the Aspero. And finally on to takeout number 6, and it's a plot twist. That is, the DB607 will way too much wheel for what I need, and that's definitely terrain dependent. While they roll very, very nicely on flat and undulating terrain, something like the DB405 is going to be much better suited for what I need next week in Adelaide, which is almost all hills. So that's what I've swapped over to. The 2025 EXAR Ultra DB405, and the tweaking continues. So this will be the setup that I'll be riding next week over at the Tour Down Under in Adelaide, where all cyclists in Australia congregate to ride, drink coffee, watch the pro racing, and spend half their day waiting at stoplights to change. Adelaide, what's with your stoplights? So if you see me rolling around over in Adelaide, feel free to come over for a chat. There'll be usually something interesting on the bike that may or may not have been released yet, and I've been known to talk about bikes all day long.
Just like now, hey Lama.
Yeah, okay. And with that, we'll see you in Adelaide.